Hey everybody, this is Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today we're going to set forth exactly the steps you need to take, the topics you need to study in the correct order to really know and understand and apply music theory. Now, music theory is such a big topic, it can be overwhelming, and maybe you've tried to learn already, maybe you've watched videos, you've read articles, whatever. There is a lot of good information out there, there is, but unless you're learning theory in a progressive, step-by-step manner, more often than not, you're going to find yourself frustrated. Now, of course, in a 15-minute YouTube video, right, I can't teach you every last thing there is to know about music theory, of course not. But what I can offer you today is a very clear path forward. And if you put the individual lessons that I'm going to give you today into practice, and yeah, you will have to practice them, you will learn and you will know a lot of music theory. You'll learn how to identify the key that a song is in. You'll know the notes in that key. You'll know the chords that you expect to find in that key. You'll know the individual notes that make up each of these chords, which will help you play triads or even extended arpeggios in your solos. And on top of that, you'll have a great foundation in place to learn deeper topics such as chord substitutions, harmonization, chord scale compatibility, altered or synthetic scales, modes, and just a ton more. Okay, so let's get right to it. Generally speaking, we can categorize our learning into four levels. And you really do want to approach these levels in the order that I'm going to give them to you now. The first level, the foundation, is that you absolutely, positively must know your chromatic scale extremely well. Remember your chromatic scale, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. It's just a listing of all the notes that are found in Western music, and there are 12. If you're not super comfortable with this, any other topic you try to learn is just going to be twice as difficult. I tell people a lot that trying to learn music theory without knowing your chromatic scale real well is a little bit like trying to learn algebra without being able to do, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into the chromatic scale right now in this video because I have an entire separate video that is all about learning and really understanding the chromatic scale and also how it applies to playing guitar, how it can help you to learn your fretboard, okay? And I'm going to put the link to that video in the description below, okay? Now, you're seeing the chromatic scale on your screen right now, and notice the notes with the number sign or hashtag symbol, whatever you want to call it. In music, we call that the sharp symbol, okay? So right after a C note, next to that you see a C sharp note. And notice that these sharp notes are vertically aligned with notes that have sort of a lowercase italicized B next to them. That lowercase b is the flat symbol. And again, I cover this in really good detail in the video on the chromatic scale. The long and the short of it is that these notes that we're talking about sometimes go by two different names, a sharp name and a flat name. So C sharp can also be called D flat. And as far as why we do that, when you use the sharp name, when you use the flat name, you'll actually learn that over the course of the next couple of levels of music theory that I'm about to get into. For now, just know that you have to know these 5 notes by their sharp name and by their flat name, okay? You really want to know your chromatic scale cold, okay? And that is level 1. That is level 1. You must know your chromatic scale backwards and forwards, literally. Level 2. What is level 2? Once you're super comfortable with your chromatic scale, your next level will actually consist of 4 related topics, okay? And these topics are going to be 1, finding the notes that make up a major scale, 2, identifying the chords that are found within that scale or that key, 3, identifying the relative minor of that major scale, and 4, identifying the chords you expect to see in that minor key. Now, I have a very long and very thorough video that teaches you these 4 related topics, and that link is going to be below. The quick and dirty on it, though, And you really do want to watch the deeper video because there's tons of on-screen graphics and I give a lot of examples to make learning easier. But the quick and dirty, the first of these 4 related topics within level 2 is how to assemble a major scale. Maybe you've heard of a formula that goes whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That's the formula that helps you assemble a major scale. And remember, a whole step is 2 frets or 2 places along the chromatic scale. Half step is 1 fret or 1 place. By the way, right away, right, you can see how important knowing your chromatic scale well is at a foundational level, okay? So again, level 2, 4 related topics. And the first topic is using your whole step, half step formula to find the notes in a given major scale or major key. Once you know how to assemble that major scale, you then want to practice saying to yourself the chords that will be found within that scale, within that key. Maybe you've heard people say something like major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. These are the identity, major, minor, diminished, the identity of the chords that are going to be found within a major key, okay? So hopefully you can see how it makes sense to learn these identities after you know how to learn to construct the major scale. So for example, if I use my whole step, half step formula to figure out the notes that are in the key of C major, they're going to end up being C, D, E, F, G, A, B. No sharped notes, no flatted notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then I can go from note to note and I can say major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And I'll end up with a C major chord, a D minor chord, an E minor chord, an F major chord, a G major chord, an A minor chord, and a B diminished chord, okay? Having this information obviously is extremely valuable. Now with this information you can look at a song, look at a chord chart, you know, from ultimateguitar.com or whatever. And using this you can figure out what key the song is in. And of course that's going to inform you what scale or what scales are going to be appropriate for soloing, improvisation, and so forth. Okay? So the first 2 topics of the second level are learning how to construct a major scale and learning what chords you expect to find in that key, okay? The third related topic is finding what we call the relative minor of the major key that we were just working with. And there are a few different ways of doing this. Consulting the circle of fifths is just fine. Identifying the relative minor as the 6th scale degree of the major, that's fine as well. Again, this is covered in the longer video dealing with the second level that I mentioned earlier. The link is in the description below. But the bottom line is you need to identify the relative minor of each given major scale. And of course, you need to recognize that the relative minor is going to have the same notes as the major scale in question. And then that 4th related topic within level 2, just as you identified the chords that you expect to see in the major key, you need to identify the chords that you expect to see in the minor key. Now, most of the chords will be the same as the major scale you were working with, but there are some exceptions you're going to want to be aware of. And once again, I go over this in a lot of detail in the level 2 video that I'm putting the link to in the description below, okay? So that's level 2. On to level 3. Level 3 is you want to start to understand what we call intervals. Now, intervals are simply the musical name for the distance between 2 notes, that's all. So for example, if I'm thinking of the distance between an A note and a C note, that happens to be 3 places along the chromatic scale, and we happen to call that interval a minor third, okay? In order to really understand intervals, it's helpful to have a basic understanding of the concept of function. Function is really just how a note or a chord behaves in a given musical context. The idea of function really does work hand in hand with intervals and helps to explain why. Remember just a few minutes ago we were talking about how important the chromatic scale is and how you have to learn both the sharp name of a note and the flat name of a note. The real answer as to whether it's appropriate to call a note by its sharp name or its flat name depends on how the note is functioning, okay? Now, you can probably guess what I'm about to say, right? Yeah, I have a whole video on understanding function and getting started with intervals, and the link to that video is going to be in the description below. And as I say in that video, Just as you really need to learn the chromatic scale, literally backwards and forwards, you really need to learn your intervals. You just flat out need to memorize them. You need to know that a minor third is 3 half steps. You need to know that a perfect fifth is 7 half steps, and so forth. You just have to commit them to memory, and then you need to be prepared to find them by counting out the appropriate number of half steps along your chromatic scale. So if I ask you, for example, what is a major third above C? A major third above C, you need to have memorized that the interval of a major third consists of 4 half steps. And then you need to know your chromatic scale well enough to be able to count out from C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Major third above C is E. And preferably, you need to be able to do this in your head without looking at your instrument and eventually without relying on a printout of the chromatic scale or whatever. You just need to know it reflexively. And that is level 3, having a basic understanding of the concept of function and memorizing and getting comfortable with your intervals. Okay? Well, just like that, it's time for level 4, which is our final level for today. And in level 4, you're going to want to begin to build chords, identify the individual notes that make up a given chord. Now, in order to build chords, of course, you're going to need to be counting out specific intervals. So once again, you can see how understanding intervals and really knowing your chromatic scale are just critical skills. But in this level 4, you're going to want to practice building several different types of chords. Those are going to be a major 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord, a minor 7 chord, and what we call a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Okay? And yes, I have a video that does all this, goes into great detail with a ton of on-screen graphics, downloadable PDFs, you name it, and the link to that video is in the description below, okay? In a nutshell, the reason we focus on a major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, and minor 7 flat 5 chord, what is sometimes called a half diminished chord, is that these are the types of chords that we're going to see when we are in a specific key. So again, going back to the second topic of what I described to you today is within level 2, the second topic within level 2, you learn what chords you expect to see in a given major key. You can see how everything is relating to everything else. Now, once you're able to assemble these chords, you can then also begin dealing with different alterations. You might assemble a dominant 7 chord, but with a flatted 5th, for example. It's an interesting sounding chord. You don't see it all that often, but you get the idea. Getting a foundation, using your chromatic scale and your understanding of intervals to build these types of chords allows you to handle even more complex, extended, or altered chords later. It also allows you to understand the concept of chord scale compatibility, where you might choose to play a different scale depending on the notes in a given chord. A very quick example of that I like to give is, let's say I'm playing in the key of A minor, and life's easy in A minor because the notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, no sharp notes, no flatted notes. But I see that upcoming in the chord sequence, there's an E7, E dominant 7 chord. And because I'm pretty comfortable building chords, I know that the E dominant 7 chord has within it a G sharp note. And so I incorporate that G sharp note into my A minor scale. In essence, I end up playing A harmonic minor rather than A natural minor, or A Aeolian, if you prefer to call it that. That's a very simple example, but you get the idea. Understanding the relationship between chords and scales is one of the keys to much deeper levels of improvisation. And that is our 4 levels or stages of learning music theory. Once again, the 4 levels, the 4 stages. 1, learning and being extremely comfortable with your chromatic scale. 2, remember that level 2 is itself subdivided into 4 steps, which are learning how to construct a major scale, learning what chords you expect to see in that major scale, identifying the relative minor of that major scale, and identifying the chords you expect to see in that relative minor key. That's all under the umbrella of level 2. Level 3 is beginning to understand the concept of function and how a note or a chord behaves, operates in a given musical context. And with that concept of function, you need to memorize and get comfortable applying the various musical intervals. And finally, level 4 is learning how to build 4 main types of chords: major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7, flat 5. And as I pointed out throughout this video, I have detailed teaching videos here on the Guitar Journey channel for each of those 4 levels. Check them out individually in the order that I presented them to you today. Levels 1 through 4. And as I said at the beginning of this video, learning these 4 levels does not mean you know every last thing about music theory. Yes, you'll know a lot. And you may even decide that you know enough and you want to stop there. That's totally fine. But if you do want to go further, well, today's lesson, in conjunction with the detailed videos, the 4 detailed videos that I'm providing you the links to, going to give you a fantastic foundation for tackling more advanced theory topics, as I mentioned, whether it's harmonization, chord substitution, synthetic scales, chord scale compatibility, you name it. Okay? That's what I have for you today. I really hope this simple guide has been helpful to you, and I hope that it helps you orient your own learning path. And if it has been helpful to you, please like this video and subscribe to the Guitar Journey channel. As you can see just from this video, we've got a ton of content here on Guitar Journey, and there's more content being added all the time. So please hit like and hit the subscribe button. And if you really liked today's video, please buy me a coffee in the description, in the link in the description below. Buy me a coffee. And finally, if you'd like to leave a comment, please do. I always say we're building a community here, and I really believe that communicating with each other is a great way for us to enhance each other's respective guitar journeys. Thanks so much. Have a great day.